Coming to you by way of the not-for-profit Mainframe Studios at 900 Keogh Way in downtown Des Moines, this is 900 Views, a podcast about building community through the arts as we build an arts community. I'm your host, Pat Bodie, and today's guest is Matt McIver, Artistic Director of the Iowa Stage Theater Company. Matt comes to Des Moines by way of North Carolina, Oberlin College, Brooklyn, New York, and a tour of duty as a professional actor earning $135 a week. Zach Mannheimer recruited Matt to come to Des Moines to serve as the Des Moines Social Club's founding artistic director. He also had a role to play in launching Pyramid Theater Company. We have to always remember to thank these guys for their efforts here in Des Moines. At Iowa Stage Theater, Matt directs a company formed as a marriage of sorts of Stage West and the local professional troupe Repertory Theater of Iowa, with ties to the late Frida Nahas's long-running drama workshop. So Iowa Stage Theater Company has quite a legacy to maintain. Matt and company don't shy from that history, with a mission, and I quote from the company's materials here, to transform Iowa, its citizens, and arts community by producing truthful, relevant, and intimate theater that inspires, enlightens, and entertains. So Matt, when I think of the word transform, I think of something really big, really significant, and so you're going to transform us. What's that transformation going to look like on the back end?
That's a great question. And we've talked about that in terms of how do we as a theater company think about our impact. Because as you just mentioned in the mission statement, our mission isn't to produce theater. Our mission is to produce transformation using theater. So what does that look like? And I think for us, it really looks like having a conversation and engaging folks in a dialogue around key issues. I'll give you an example. Our first show this season of our season opener for our second season was a play called Fun Home, which is a Tony Award-winning musical about Alison Bechdel, who is America's preeminent lesbian cartoonist, MacArthur Genius Award winner. And it's a memoir of her growing up. And we were able to partner with One Iowa, a terrific organization. Daniel Hoffman-Zimmel and his team are great. And they led talkbacks after every show. It's a great show. It's very moving, but there's a lot to process. There were a lot of folks who identified with pieces of it or had new information coming at them. So that's, to me, when I think about what we can do at Iowa Stage in terms of transformation, it's being a space for that kind of dialogue. I really strongly believe that theater's a dialogue, not a lecture. It's not a one-way communication of the theater company telling you something and then you go away. I think it's got to be feedback from the audience. It's got to be the audience talking to us and to each other about all of these issues and topics that are so important in our world today.
And what's the transformative back end of that? How are we different? How are we changed? How are we transformed as a result of this effort?
Well, I think that one thing is that's special about live theater, that's different from other art forms. In some ways, I think it's the most human of all art forms because you're watching people on stage doing people stuff. They're not. Sometimes they're great singers and dancers, and you're marveling at the athleticism and the prowess of it. But a lot of times, it's people doing things that you can recognize as human behavior. At least, hopefully, if we do it right? So it gives us an opportunity to be in the room with the art as it's happening in front of you. Live performances like nothing else, whether it's music or dance or theater. And what's very special, too, is, you mentioned in our mission statement, intimate, truthful, and relevant. The intimacy of what we do, because we perform at the Come and Go Theater of the Des Moines Social Club, and in the fall we'll be moving to the Stoner Theater. These are two of the most intimate venues in Des Moines. You're sitting right on top of the action. The worst seats in the house are maybe 50 feet from the stage. So it's a very special way to bring people together. You have to leave your house. You can't just watch it on your phone. You have to go be among other human beings, which is
tough. It's tough.
Extraordinarily challenging for us in the small screen days. And I think that it creates this little community of who saw the play that night, and then creates a little bit bigger community of who saw that play when it was performed, and you can talk about that. I have people who mention shows to me that we did at the Social Club 10 years ago. So it's it's a special experience, that live theater. So how are we different? I think we're a little bit more connected. We're a little bit more human. I think we see things that take us a little, if we're doing our job and picking the shows right, I think we see things that take us a little bit outside of our everyday lives and what we do every single day into somebody else's life, into somebody else's world, into somebody else's problems and fears and challenges, and we're able to empathize and connect with that other person. So a little bit more social, a little bit more empathetic, a little bit more connected every time you go see a piece of live theater.
And I hope people are enjoying that we're right here by the train tracks. That's not part of Mainframe Studios. This is coming to you by way of Mainframe Studios, but we're actually in the rehearsal space for Iowa Stage Theater right now.
The Iowa Stage World Headquarters, as we refer to it.
At 111 11th, right?
111 11th. 11T1, as the hobbits say. Yeah.
Okay. So tell me about the status, if you will, of our theatrical community, because this is not just about building the community through the arts, but building the arts community. So how are we doing as a theater arts community?
That's a great question, and it's something I've thought about a lot in the last 10 years since I came to Des Moines. When I first moved here, there was still Stage West, and there was Art Repertory Theater of Iowa was a few years in, and there was the Playhouse, and that was kind of what was going on at that time. And a group of artistic directors and folks, and we started doing plays at the Social Club, and we started talking to each other a little bit more, and we started trying to maybe get out of our own little silos a little bit and connect a little bit more. And some of those efforts led to new things that started happening. Tallgrass happened either right when we started or shortly after we got here in 2008.
It's a theater company that performs in West Des Moines.
West Des Moines, yeah. West Des Moines Theater Company. They perform at it's right by Stillwater Elementary School there, and I forget the name of the space that they're in. So
I've been there, and I can't think of it right at the moment either.
Right. You know right where I'm talking about. Just off Grand there. They either were just starting or had just started when we first came to town about 10 years ago. And since then, we've seen Pyramid launch. We've seen Des Moines Young Artists Theater launch. And you really have to look at theaters as an ecosystem. All of these companies have a slightly different emphasis. Pyramid is really focused on opportunities for African-American artists and promoting African-American dramatists. And they do fantastic work, also at the Stoner Theater.
They're great.
Des Moines Young Artists does amazing work with youth and child actors, and not just doing the kind of plays, not just doing quote-unquote children's plays, which are fun in their own right, but doing, a few years back they did an age-appropriate Romeo and Juliet where Romeo was 17 and Juliet was 13, and suddenly this play was completely different.
Did they live at the end, though?
No. And it became a play, much less romantic and more a play about very young people making terrible decisions, and a tragedy in its own right. So they've done, they've done School of Rock, they've done Rent, they've done these big, challenging, interesting shows. And David Van Cleve's got a great eye over there. Tiffany Johnson at Pyramid is a wonderful artistic director. Kim Matt Martin.
And actress.
And director. So there's really talented people doing really interesting work. Tallgrass is doing fun stuff. I just saw them a few months or two back, the musical that they did that Megan Helmer's directed. Charlie Reese was in it. Their passion project, their dream project that they do, where people come to them and I've always wanted to do this play, and they stage it. They give them the resources to do it. I love that about their mission. So I think there's a really fascinating ecosystem of different kinds of theaters. I mean, the Playhouse is a huge theater. I mean, for performance space, it's big. The stage is big. They've got a theater twice the size of seating capacity of the Stoner, more than twice. And they've got bigger budgets than most of the rest of us do. They do more shows. They've just got a bigger operation. I mean, I guess.
And an unprecedented history, really.
If you've been around for 100 years, I guess you meet a couple people. But they've been doing great work for a century now. So we're out of a tradition of independent theater in Des Moines and what became a tradition of professional theater in Des Moines. That was really important to Repertory Theater of Iowa, as I appreciated you mentioning at the beginning. And we're trying to grow that aspect of the theater here in town.
And so that was kind of a question I had is there a difference in the capacity and maybe capacity is not the right word. It could be emphasis or stress of a professional theater versus these more community theater-based operations.
Sure.
In terms of their impact on the arts community and their impact on community.
That's a great question. And I would say, I mean, sort of the way I tend to think about that is, as you mentioned, a question of emphasis. It's kind of what you put first. In a community theater, you put community first. It's really about it's volunteer performers. They don't pay the actors at the Playhouse. So you're building a community, and they've got the wonderful celebration of their volunteers that they do every year. In a professional theater, the theater is what we put first. Not that we don't have a good time putting on shows, because we absolutely do, but for us, it's a question of quality, it's a question of standard, it's a question of challenge, it's a question of how do we grow our quality show after show and year after year. Every show that goes up, I want to be better than anything else we've ever done. And I want it to stretch us in some direction we haven't gone before. And I think that we've had an exciting season in that regard. We just did The Lion in Winter, which is a classic tale of medieval England family feud. No, that sounds like a game show, but family feuding over who's going to inherit the throne, right? So a friend of mine said if Aaron Sorkin wrote Game of Thrones, it would be this play.
Yes.
And now we've got next Gruesome Playground Injuries, which is a romance about two friends from the ages of 8 to 38 who find love in each other in a succession of nurses' offices, emergency rooms, and funeral parlors. It's a delightful show, but it's completely different from Lion in Winter. And then after that, we have Disgraced, which is a look at a passionate, smart, funny, very moving look at American attitudes towards Islam and the Middle East, that part of the world, looked at through the structure of a dinner party that just goes horribly wrong, just terribly wrong. So those are three really different plays that we have lined up in a row, and I'm excited about that because each of them is going to give our audience something very different, a different kind of experience, a different kind of theater, a different kind of performance. And the spaces are different, every time around. So we've got wonderful designers we work with and creative visionary directors who are doing some fascinating stuff.
So when you had this marriage, you really brought together kind of the traditional theater approach and this more contemporary piece. And I was wondering if there wasn't some level of metaphor there for what it takes to actually have a robust, vibrant, dynamic community.
Sure. I think that we take very seriously that we're the child of two parents. And as you mentioned, RTI, Repertory Theater of Iowa, was very focused on the classics. Stage West was very focused on cutting-edge theater. So we are classics to the cutting edge, and that's sort of our brief, is the greatest stories ever told on stage then and now. So I think that, what it takes, in terms of what it takes to put on theater, I think you have to have, again, going to that idea of an ecosystem of theater companies, you have to have some of everything. You've got to have folks like Pyramid who are really raising diversity and inclusion and pushing those issues front and center. You've got to have something that is recruiting younger talent like Des Moines Young Artists does. You've got to have some place that can afford to stage these big musicals that we can't fit in the Stoner. I mean, we're not going to do, well, I won't say we won't do Guys and Dolls because maybe we would, but, we're not going to do 42nd Street in the Stoner. That's just too big a show. But the Playhouse can do it. So you have to have this diversity for a couple of reasons. Number one, you give your audience choices, and you start to show them how broad and how rich our theatrical traditions and heritage are, and what exciting work is being done at the cutting edge of this. And I didn't mention before, and I absolutely have to, Open Door Rep, which is site-specific theater, a fascinating kind of theater that we haven't had a ton of in this community, and that's their whole gig, is doing things in unusual spaces. Dead Dog Park that they did in the Barnum Factory on the second floor. I might suggest to them to not do that in December next time because, my God, it was cold up there. But it was a wonderful show, and you forgot the cold. But it was so there's a fascinating range of things that you can do. And
I mentioned they're in residence at Mainframe right now. And
in residence at Mainframe, yeah. Yes, they are, the show that Marnie's directing. and doing fascinating work. So that you've got that whole ecosystem which shows the diversity of what theater can be and do. And we're just trying to push it out to more and more people, get more and more folks through the door so that they understand. Those of us who do theater do it because we believe it changes lives, and we know that for a fact because it changed ours. And we want to offer that to audiences. It won't change everybody's life in the way it changed mine, but it can touch anybody's life.
Do you miss acting?
Oh gosh, I do it every now and again. I do a little bit. Acting's probably more fun for me. Directing is more satisfying. I have a little bit of a director's brain, and even when I was acting, I would see things and that I would want to fix them in other scenes that I wasn't in. Probably not paying enough attention to my own performance. But as a director, that's my job. If I see something that's not working, I have to go fix it. That's what I'm there for. So that's very satisfying to me, and I really appreciate the opportunity. We've got one of the differentiators for Iowa Stage is we have a resident artist company. So we have a group of actors, designers, technicians who are committed to us, and we're committed to them. And working with that group and seeing what they're capable of. We just put a cast list up for Macbeth at Salisbury House in June. We do Shakespeare on the Lawn every June. And, I'm just super excited. That cast doesn't even start rehearsing for 6 weeks, but I'm super excited about that show just from the casting process. So seeing what these folks can do and finding new opportunities for us to grow as a company and for us to deepen our impact in the community, that's just really satisfying to me.
Now, I know you are making a living at this gig, coming close at least, doing pretty well. And you've got a business manager, but what about those actors? They're getting paid.
They are.
But to what extent are we to the point where we can actually employ a team of actors and it be their full-time gig?
We're a ways from that, I'll be honest. We need to grow as a company. We need to grow our audience, and we need to grow our community support. We have the goal of someday being an equity company. So Actors Equity is the union for stage actors. And they regulate what you can pay an actor if they're a member of the union. And we have a couple of company members who are union members. I actually am an Actors Equity member myself, which is one reason I don't act very much. I can't afford me. I can't afford what I would have to pay me for me to be in a show when I know I've got other talent that I can use. And that's something that the community, we're going to need to continue to grow and educate and grow our base and grow our support to get to the point where we can do more of that. We do make an effort to employ equity actors where we can, but it's much more expensive. It's significantly more expensive right now. The way it's currently structured with us. There may be other models we can look at, but we're a ways away from having the kind of resources. And even if you're an equity actor, the amount that you're making isn't going to cover your bills unless you're in a bunch of shows in a year. We're growing as a market, I think, but we're not there yet to the point where we would have actors who wouldn't have to have other jobs. We make a point of paying everyone. We do our best with that, but we're not at the point where we have the resources, where we have the sales base under us to be able to say, yeah, we're gonna move in that equity direction yet.
Why are we missing those resources? Are we just not enough of a population center yet, or is there still some hesitation in actually supporting theater with the resources that we do have available?
That's a really great question, and it's something that we've put some thought to, and I don't know that I have an answer. I think that there is, I think that there are some misperceptions that people have of theater. I think that they often think it's stuffy. I think that the boom in Broadway and Hamilton and things like that, I think has been really good in a lot of respects because it brings more folks into the theater at least once for those big sort of tentpole event kind of things. I think that folks are sometimes maybe hesitant to try something different, that they don't know what it is. I mean, Hamilton, you knew it was going to be good. Everybody had been raving about it for years. Something where you don't know the title, something where you're not as familiar with it. I think that may be a challenge for folks. But I think, too, we need to keep trying to get out there and connect with people and show them that you can have a great experience in the theater without it being identical to how you go to a movie. It's not the same as going to a ball game. There are some different kind of ways that you interact with it, but it can be an exciting experience all on its own, and it can be funny and smart and moving and passionate and engaging and all those wonderful things that you want from a great movie, that you want from a great theater experience, that you want from a great performance experience of any kind, whether it's music or what have you. You want to be engaged. You want to be moved up out of your seat. And all of that is stuff that we strive to do. So our goal is we're going to keep trying to be the best theater company we possibly can be, to deliver an experience for those folks in the seats that they cannot get anywhere else. I'm flattered a little bit when people say, oh my gosh, you could have seen that show in Chicago. You could have seen that show in New York. I'm wanting to move the needle in the direction of they go to Chicago and they say, you could have seen that in Des Moines. Right?
Yeah.
Let's move that needle that way.
I like that.
Let's have folks understand the quality of the artists that we have here. And we constantly have people ask us, oh gosh, did you bring those actors in? Or are they? And like, no, they're all local. Resident Artist Company members, folks who live here in town. We're working with tremendous local talent, and I think folks just don't quite get it yet.
Well, do you think some of that humility comes from the fact that we've lost critique and criticism and that kind of review process? I remember when I first came to town back in the mid-'70s, we had Joan Bunke and Joseph Mossman, and I'll never forget playing in an orchestra pit for Lock Up Your Daughters at the Unitarian Universalist Church, and Joseph Mossman writing, a small backstage orchestra provided stalwart support and was frequently in tune.
Oh my.
Is that wonderful or what? What great writing.
And was frequently in tune.
And how do you keep yourself tuned when you really don't have that level of critique or discussion in the larger zeitgeist around what's happening in your theater community?
I think that's a great question. I don't have an answer to it, but I will tell you that it is a question I have talked about not just with Siobhan at Mainframe, but also with Michael Eagle at the Des Moines Metro Opera. We've all talked about the challenge of not having that sort of critique in the community, about the challenge of not having that sort of central arts platform. I mean, you look at the changes in the newspaper industry. You talk to folks at the Register, and the features desk used to be 5-6 people. Now it's one culture writer, and by culture I mean anything culturally related, and the food guy, and they just one guy can't cover everything. Michael Moraine used to be in charge of writing about every kind of art there was in town, and when he left, they expanded the job. I mean, that's just remarkable to me. It's beyond a human scope at this point. So I think that's challenging. One way that we've tried to tackle that, and something that I've been really impressed by. Our resident artist company developed what we call a feedback committee. And the feedback committee's entire job is to think of ways to try and make us better. How do we handle feedback for our scriptees play reading series? How do we handle talkbacks? How do we handle, when we have folks who work on talkbacks, Heidi Mason does that. Jonathan DeLima is heading up our feedback committee right now. And how do we constantly find ways to challenge ourselves, to make ourselves better, to improve our processes? We took a hard look last year at what is our code of conduct? What are the commitments that we're making to ourselves and the community about what kind of place we're going to be to work? And we adopted the Chicago Theater Standards. Kim Hames, who is one of our resident artist company members and sort of heads up that effort, was involved in helping draft those when she lived in Chicago. So it's a standard of conduct for how you work, and we very consciously adopted it, and said this is what we're asking of ourselves as a company and the people who work with us. This is what we're representing to you as to how we're going to interact with each other. So I think for us, it's about trying to constantly be intentional on being better. Like I said before, I want every show to be better than the one before it. And if we keep doing that, we're going to get good at this.
Yeah. Well, I've gone too long because, of course, this is absolutely fascinating.
Thank you so much.
In just 60 seconds, give me the highlights of the next season, because this is going to be posted after your Cocktails and Cabaret event at Mainframe Studios, your fundraiser where you announce that season. Give me a couple of big highlights. Make it real quick.
We've got We start with a repertory presentation of A Doll's House by Henrik Ibsen and Lucas Nath's Tony-nominated sequel to A Doll's House Part 2, running in rep starting in September, end of September.
That's huge. That's great.
A new production of A Christmas Carol. Robert John Ford, creator of Caucus the Musical, is writing a new musical about the presidential process. These guys are auditioning for the role of a lifetime, so he's adapting a chorus line to Adore Us line. We have the world premiere that will open January 24th. Then 2 great more plays at the Stoner, The Cake by Becca Brunstetter and Sweat, Pulitzer Prize winner from Lynn Nottage, and Shakespeare on the Lawn will be Julius Caesar.
Oh, this is fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I also want to mention real quick that you are in partnership with artist Caitlin McBurney.
We are.
And have this wonderful thing going where she's basically reflecting on your work.
She has done original oil paintings that are our basis of our poster images and program images for our entire season.
Yeah, and they're very they're insightful.
Yeah.
So I urge people to check that out. We didn't get to touch on a lot of things. We'll have to do this again sometime.
Absolutely, I'd love to.
And I do want to mention the scriptees. Those things are amazing. You have one coming up on April 9th, Sweat by Lynn, Nottage.
Nottage. That's going to be in our season next year, but we put it in scriptees before we knew that, and we're very excited about that production. Folks should come out to the Come and Go Theater on, Tuesday, April 9th?
April 9th.
Yep, Tuesday, April 9th at 7 p.m. for a stage reading of Sweat. It's a really great play.
Yeah, and I just went to the one by Karen Schaefer. It was outstanding, just remarkable.
She's so good.
Yes. And so real quick, a note about Mainframe. Iowa State design students are part of a studio class that will transform Mainframe Studios' atrium. Their work unveils at the May 3rd First Friday event and will be on display during the summer. And with that, we've got to kind of part, but boy, I'm sorry. This has been exciting. Thank you so much.
I'd love to do it again.
All right, take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt McIver.